like to join me on the stage? Thank you. Hi, everybody, and thank you for that introduction. And I'm not sure that that I warrant it as a wonderful speaker, but it's a pity in a way that I'm your last speaker, and that I would have loved to be here during the day and take part. But unfortunately, there were some things going on in Parliament, like Brexit and education, you know, some that needed to be debated, and I've got to get back for a vote. We hope a vote on education policy, though, you know, I know this is not political, but the Tories have shown a decided reluctance to actually vote on issues, which makes our job as opposition more challenging. But that's not what I came here to talk about. I came here to say, well, firstly, actually, to say thank you to the fourth group for you know, for this report. So I'm the Shadow Minister for Industrial Strategy, Science and Innovation, but I'm also, and I'll talk a bit about that, a tech evangelist. And the reason that, but one of the reasons I believe in technology is because it's of its capacity to empower people, citizens, and we very rarely hear the citizen voice, and particularly not the global citizen's voice. So I welcome the report. I'm not going to say I agree with everything in it, but I really welcome the report because many of the conclusions it comes to are similar to ones that I came to working in the tech sector for 20 years and also as a regulator. And I think that the global citizen voice is absolutely essential if we're to make this new fourth, and I used to argue about whether it was the fourth, the third, or the fifth, but I've given up on that. So we'll just say this new fourth industrial revolution work for everyone. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think that means. So I'm the Member of Parliament for Newcastle upon Tyne Central, which is a fantastic city in the north of England, for those of you who have never been past Watford. And I'm also Shadow Minister for Industrial Strategy, Science and Innovation. And before becoming an MP, I had what my constituents still like to call a proper job, which was as an chartered electrical engineer working in the tech sector. And it was growing up in the shadows of the greats of the first industrial revolution, such as Stephenson, Armstrong, Parsons. That's Rachel Parsons, the first female naval engineer and the founder of the Women's Engineering Society. You know, that was what inspired me to study engineering as a young woman. And there weren't very many of us doing it then, or now for that matter. And the reason that, you know, I was always interested in politics, but the reason I wanted to go into engineering, because I believe that engineering and politics are the twin engines of progress. And I thought that as an engineer, I could make more progress than as a politician. It's something that I changed my mind on over my career. And one of the reasons for that, to be honest with you, is because one of the things that my career as a software engineer, hardware engineer, product manager, network engineer, and operations engineer, you know, whatever the question, technology is never the answer on its own. Technology only works in the context of the people and the processes it works around and with. Now, techno-libertarians, of which there are many, far too many, may deny it, but when it comes to technology, there is definitely such a thing as society. And unfortunately, the sector has a long, long way to go in terms of engaging with it. So I just got back, Friday I think it was, from Web Summit in Lisbon, the world's greatest concentration of tech sector, 70,000 people over 3 days, you know, 5 halls, 7 stages. And in comparison with the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, in Las Vegas, which I also visited this year, it was less glitzy, it was more diverse, that's for sure, and there was more sort of the real virtual world. But the voice of ordinary people was nowhere to be heard. Yes, Tony Blair was there, but I wouldn't say he is the people's politician now, if he ever was. And there were a few other elected politicians, such as myself and the mayor of Vancouver, but there was no sort of non-techie third sector. It was entirely absent. There was no consumer rights groups, no citizens groups. And that mattered because it meant that, Web Summit, which I thought was a great event, but it was basically still tech talking to tech. And that has got to change, because technology has lost trust. And as an engineer, I find it particularly heartbreaking the way that tech has, the trajectory of boring. I used to be not ashamed, but hesitant to say I was an engineer at parties because people would basically fall asleep, So tech has gone from boring but useful to exciting but incredibly exploitative. And here in the UK, we had the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook exemplifying the dark arts, increasingly thought to be at the heart of the tech body corporate. I understand that earlier today you discussed the challenges posed to democracy by micro-targeting and hacking, and I'll be interested to know what your conclusions were. And I think that on both sides of the Atlantic, some commentators and governments are waking up to this and other challenges. So we had the European Commission's £2.4 billion fine of Google, which I thought was the right fine for the wrong reasons, but at least it signaled a determination to hold the tech giants to account. And Transport for London insistence that Uber is a taxi firm underneath its tech cloak was also, and needed to improve their safety practices, was also a real step forward. And I think that increasingly we can expect to see that so-called tech companies are regulated as real-world companies because their real-world impact is so great. But the problem is that such regulation is old world, generally ad hoc and incoherent. And to address that, we need to put people at the heart of technology. And we need to do this by tackling the 4 key challenges I say are posed by the new industrial revolution. And I'll just go through those briefly, and I'll be interested to know how much they reflected what you discussed today. So the first for me is who controls your data and why isn't it you? The report notes that that's one of the key issues for citizens today, and we have GDPR, but it's 7 years out of date. It barely takes account of AI or algorithms, and it completely ignores the Internet of Things, which is going to increase exponentially the generation of data, everybody is leaving increasingly data trails, and we still have no idea who owns it. Who will own and control the data which will be gleaned by all the devices? There's 60 billion devices which will be connected to the Internet of Things. Is one of the great issues of our time, and it's already getting too late because the facts on the ground mean that it is a free-for-all. The second challenge is what's going to be done with your data once it's captured. So we know that Google's search algorithms can be gamed by extremists. And I've been told that one major dating site operates its matchmaking algorithm for short-term relationships because that increases return business. And Uber knows you're likely to pay more for a ride if your phone battery is low, and it knows when your phone battery is low. Now, they say that they don't use that data, but there's no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing because their algorithms are locked tight. and there's no access to them for regulators or for government. And they say that, they're just a mirror to society, these algorithms. And it's not, it's not their responsibility what the results are. But I don't think mirror is the right metaphor. By automating decision makings, algorithms industrialize bias. And they're only as good as the training data and the imagination of their designers. And given that their designers are likely to come from a very narrow demographic, that imagination is likely to be quite narrow too. So we need to be able to hold companies accountable for the unintended consequences of the algorithms and machine learning that are increasingly driving their profits. And that means opening up their algorithms so that regulation can access that. Now, The Sun, when I said this at the Labour conference, The Sun reported me as saying that Labour wants government to inspect applications for racism, which I thought was particularly amusing given that it is Facebook and other social media algorithms which The Sun cannot access, which increasingly mean that The Sun and print media are dying. So, what goes around comes around. The third challenge is diversity. And in Labour, for us, diversity is an economic and technological imperative. It's not an optional add-on. So technology won't reflect the needs of citizens until it is built and maintained by groups representative of citizens. When it is designed largely by white, male, relatively well-off engineers, it reflects their concerns. Now, I don't know how many of you have an iPhone. Quite a few. How many of you use the Health app? So when I've been told when Apple developed the Health app, they wanted to make sure it supported all aspects of, people's health. So all potential indicators of wellness, such as temperature change, weight fluctuations, exercise, diet, sleep, and it did. If you were a man, they forgot about periods. And the reason they did that was because not one person in the group designing them had one. And I think that is a great visible example of what is going on, which is less visible across the tech sector, which is that the people in the room or on the chat or in the GitHub developing these algorithms and are not representative of the people who are going to use them. And the final challenge, I would say, is digital labor relations. So, what people refer to as the gig economy. Companies operate as online platforms, they don't own physical assets, and they claim to have very few employees. So, again, the Uber driver, classed as self-employed, doesn't get sick pay training or any of the rights you might expect. But you do have to own and maintain your own car and pay for your own petrol. Now, we welcome people taking control of their working lives. And again, technology offers huge potential for that and taking on the risk to start their own business. But Uber drivers don't enjoy the flexibility or freedom of genuinely self-employed workers. They're subject to the discipline of rating systems, again, closed algorithms, which impose harsh penalties on workers who don't conform closely to what the company wants. So self-employment used to mean freedom from a boss. Now it just means your boss is an algorithm. These practices are widespread, and we have nearly 500,000 workers estimated by Citizens Advice to be in bogus self-employment. And they are fighting back. And again, the labor movement is adapting, sort of slowly, to the 21st century. And we saw GMB's victory, the union GMB's victory in the courts last October on the Deliveroo strike, and further victories since then. But there isn't a coherent framework for that. And it is the lack of an effective regulatory framework which is hampering our ability to tackle these four challenges and make the new economy work for everyone. And I often say that the opposite of regulation is not no regulation, it is bad regulation. Too often, tech libertarians denigrate or reject the importance of regulation. They say that government has no right to regulate, or it's too dumb to regulate, or everything's fine, and if it isn't, blockchain will fix it. But unless there is an open, honest conversation and a debate right now about the right kind of regulatory framework, we're going to end up with a messy, ad hoc regulatory jungle as legislators respond in knee-jerk fashion to negative tabloid headlines. And the report highlights, I think it was particularly that debate, that conversation can't happen without the citizen consumer voice. Or at least if it does happen without it, then it will be ineffective. And the government, our government here, is unfortunately drowning in Brexit. And let me tell you, I know that, because it's just the capacity of any government department to do anything which is not Brexit is incredibly limited, given its own internal power struggles as well. So it is really, 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 at this time, up to citizens and consumers to demand that governments do their job, and particularly here, where we have such a limited capacity in the current government. Now, I was saying Labour, and the Shadow Minister for Digital is Liam Byrne, and we're developing what we call a digital Bill of Rights and engaged in consultation with, it was an online sort of crowdsourcing of potential measures for the People's Plan for Digital. And we've also promised to make tech more diverse by introducing diversity charters to keep companies accountable for their employment practices. But above all, and that's why I was keen to come here today, we believe, that's what I fundamentally believe, that technology should be putting people in control. Jeremy Corbyn has said technology should be empowering workers, enabling us to cooperate on a scale not possible before. And so to end on a positive note, I still believe that's possible. I believe technology as a tool for people can deliver a better, more equal and more progressive world. But the tech industry needs to engage with the many and do that quickly, or it will soon find itself only on the side of the very, very few.